Welcome to Failing Forward. This show is all about the other side of success. We talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, and innovators who aren't afraid to share the mistakes they've made. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. Every setback is just a setup for something bigger, if you're willing to learn from it. And we're back for lucky number 13 episode of Failing Forward. As Will likes to say, the number one podcast in Youngstown, akin to our friends at the All In podcast. Today we've got a guest that I'm really excited about. I've been around Mark. I've heard Mark speak. I've heard Mark's story many different times. He's someone that is an absolute champion for our community in the Youngstown region. There's not an economic thing that's happening, a political thing that's happening, a business thing that's happening within the chamber that Mark's fingerprints aren't on some way and somehow. So really honored to have Mark Lamoncha, the CEO of Humtown Products, join us on the pod today.
Glad to be here.
All right. So before we get into some of the meat of some of the conversation, I want to know, did you guys get your bike ride in on Sunday? You and your wife?
Went 20 miles yesterday on the Greenway Trail. Turned in a little bit of a human icicle.
Yeah.
Nothing like a long hot shower to melt that, warm that core back up again.
Yep. So every Sunday, that's the tradition for you guys. When it's not snowing.
Pretty much. I'm good down to about 45 degrees.
Yeah.
What about
no
her?
Ice and no snow.
Yeah, what about her, though? Is she a little more dedicated?
She's really dedicated.
Yeah.
She pretty much rides to the year. Like if it's 2025, she tries to ride 2,025 miles
nice.
In that year.
That's impressive.
Awesome. Oh, yeah.
It's a feat.
I had an e-bike, probably 18 years ago that would only go 3 miles because of my love for innovation.
Yeah.
So then when Trek came out with these ones that'll go 158 miles on light assist,
yeah.
And they'll go go 20 miles an hour plus.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice.
So, she loves to ride and I love technology. So it rides together.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect.
When you can go uphill, I did it in Banff. We went to Lake Louise and I couldn't have done it otherwise. It was just way too much, but that pedal assist is pretty fantastic.
Well, and I like the assist, but not the throttle bikes because it's getting so many more people out on the trail that we've suggested 8 or 9 people, and then my wife, she can't do it, and all of a sudden then you see both of them riding again.
Yep.
All they have to do is get out, and it helps people get started.
Yep. Yep. And sometimes that's the hard part.
Right? It is.
Whether it's
talking about
in
that.
business, whether it's in life, you just got to start.
You got to have that assist.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So, Mark, you're a Columbiana County guy. You've built this business in Columbiana, Ohio, and you grew up there. And tell us about your dad. Tell us how you ended up getting into this business. How did this all start?
Well, my father, had a very strong work ethic because even all of his hobbies were somewhat like work. He had a pine tree farm, and every year we'd go out and plant a seedling, and then we would trim it and spray it, and then 7 or 8 years later, then we went. He was just making money for his mother to help my grandmother out, and then we would go out and we would walk the customers all back, and they always wanted to go to the back of the lot. So
the biggest trees are there.
Yeah. Right? didn't have a step counter then, but got lots of steps in. And then they would always come back up front and pick the tree that they saw first. But it taught me a lot, about marketing and that, where you actually have to see further out, and you have to. Although I'm a high energy person, it still taught me the value of the fact that there's a process to get to that Christmas tree.
Yep.
And then he also raised bees. I stayed in the truck on that one because they could smell my fear.
Yeah.
So,
they're pretty docile creatures. For the most part.
Honey is a big part of farm to table in that now. And if you get local honey, you actually get a lot of the protection, of your area, the DNA of your area, to have local honey rather than honey that's made somewhere else.
Yeah.
And he was helping people because they would get swarms, and
yep.
it taught me the value of learning what you don't want to do when
Yeah, right.
you grow up. But
Yep.
then he did a lot of work inside of he was very, very gifted at wood. And he built the chapel and different things in Methodist Church in Columbiana. Mm-hmm. And he'd take me along to help. It would give me the opportunity to spend time with my dad.
Yep.
And then they worked at a pattern shop, after they got back from the war in the 50s. And there were a lot of differences back then. The operating system of the 1930s, up to the 60s were, different. And different that he found is that they had, as a pattern maker, they wore a suit. They had to wear a white shirt and a tie.
Okay.
To show the level of professionalism.
Yeah.
And then, they weren't allowed to talk. They were only allowed to talk to the boss.
Okay.
And then were able to talk before work and after work. So they decided to form the pattern shop then out at Humtown so that they could work and talk at the same time and enjoy the benefit of every era has differences, what I mean? I'm not condemning. I'm just saying the fact that they wanted to be able to have that value of that conversation.
Yeah.
And
so what is a pattern shop? What's a pattern maker make?
the easiest thing would be to look at like your engine block in your car. It has the outside shape that you see when you pour the oil into it, but on the inside it has to have all those cavities for the piston, for the timing chain, for the the crankshaft.
Okay.
So what happens is you basically engineers, from GM or whatever auto company it is, design that engine block. And if you think of, just to put it in simplistic terms, at the beach, you take a bucket and you fill it. That's a mold. Mm-hmm. You fill it with sand and dump it out, and you have the shape of the bucket. Mm-hmm. And that's really the elementary version of what happens. They have to design the outside shape in several different outside molds, and then the inside shape it's cored, and so that's why they call it a sand core and a sand mold. So you have your bottom of the mold is called the drag, and then the top is called the cope, and in between where you need to, there's some of those holes that are so large that you really can't drill it out.
Right.
So the sand core is held together with a resin that at the temperature of iron where it melts, as the liquid metal is cooling, it actually starts to disintegrate the bond between the sand grains. Mm-hmm. Obviously, at the highest temperature that metal melts, a few degrees above that is where sand turns into glass. Mm-hmm. If not, we'd have no castings.
Right.
We'd still have wooden wheels and, like it just gave us the ability, and it goes clear back to the Egyptians where they would make molds, and they called it oil sand back then, very simple, to make all the different jewelry and different shapes like that.
And so, I mean, we're talking about a portion of manufacturing that has very little room for error. When you talk about pistons and engines and like those things, if you put a hair inside of that thing, the piston's not going to move.
Right.
Right. So
they have to allow on that pattern when they build it, they call it, they add stock to it so that when they go to machine it, that it will make a final cut to where that piston will ride up and down there. So it has to be very accurate. And there are many different types of metals, but in an engine block, it's cast iron. But then if you look at the pipe industry that was in this valley, we probably had about 30 different pattern shops.
Okay.
In a tri-county area, because in order to pierce the pipe, somebody has to make a pattern that kind of looks like a large bullet.
Okay.
And it's tapered so that when that pipe is coming out of the mill and comes through it, that piercer point actually pierces the hole in that round piece of metal. Mm-hmm. And then there's shoes and guides. There were so many different castings that needed to be made. And that, our pattern shop at one time, probably up until about 1990, I think maybe we had 15 or 16 pattern makers. And, when the mills closed, the pipe mills were gone, then we had to go a lot more long distance. Probably our largest, when we got to our largest point, was we were making a lot of the patterns for the railroad.
Okay.
And most of those parts were all made in the United States. As a matter of fact, our largest customer that we shipped maybe 30 semi-loads a week to was Columbus Steel Castings. And that was owned by Prescott Bush.
Really?
Yeah, they had like 2,300 people there that worked there at one time. And, now it's gone. And most of the rail castings are made outside the United States now.
So a lot of what I see from you externally and observing your business makes even more sense now to know that you had, an entrepreneurial father. You had a father that also taught you the fundamentals of farming, because farming, there's a lot of interesting things that align well with business ownership and entrepreneurialism, is that you got to plant seeds. You've got to embrace this delayed gratification. And that's really the difference between, I think, the truly successful businesses and the ones that maybe are more of a flash in the pan and have short-term success, is that they don't embrace the notion of delayed gratification. So a lot of the things that you've implemented in this business are based on this theory of, gamifying, the industry and creating these industrial athletes, which I want to talk a little bit about. But this just makes a heck of a lot of sense to me to understand that this is your background. So I want to stick down that line in terms of understanding your background. And where did you grow up?
Grew up in Columbiana.
And where did you go to school down there?
Went to Columbiana High School.
Columbiana High School. And then, have you ever left the area? Did you stay here from high school all the way through? What was the story from then?
No, I stayed there until I was about 25, and then I got married, and then we actually kind of moved out in the country to Crestview, is where we live and still live, and our children grew up, and all three of our boys, Brandon, Brenton, and Bronson, went to Crestview High School.
Okay. So we've got
All
our
local.
second Crestview alum on the
Yeah,
pod
that's
between
right.
Mark Lamoncha and Adam Hickman. That's cool. So I know something that, you and I have had some, common ground on, is the relationship with our wives in regards to what that means to our businesses. And I've talked a lot on the pod about, how critical my relationship with my wife is, and the fact that, we're a team and a true partnership. And I tell people that our firm, as they're kind of coming up and they're starting to, settle into their life, that this is the most important partner decision you're going to make, right? Is the person at home. And I've talked to you about the things that, your wife's involved in at the business. And so she's now doing, she's an educator. She has a passion for teaching, right? And what is she doing in the Humtown business today?
I think if we took a step back, actually, while she was going to college, she worked the summers out at Humtown.
Okay.
And we weren't actually going together then, but we had dated in high school.
Okay.
And she went to Grove City for education, and when she completed, during the last 2 years, we were dating, and then we got married. And she taught at Columbiana Elementary School for a year. She found out that she didn't realize that there was homework for teachers.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a
So
lot of
she
work.
said, basically, if I come to work for you, I can go, and she has a lot of outside interests. She loves to be outside, the biking and, and kayaking and different things. She said, I can go home and not have any homework.
Yep.
So she's been in a business from the very, beginning. She worked in the shop, of course, in college, and then she understood it. So then, she went into the office and, did all those functions, and, was currently still in customer service. But when it really took, a quantum leap when, I started to get involved with the Business Advisory Council, and then, Governor Mike DeWine asked me to be on the state board of the Department of Education. And then I just started realizing that, why are we not scouting and taking interest in our young adults at a much younger age like we do in sports? And I realized that why do I expect them to show up with their hands at 18 or 22 if they're out of college and come to me if we weren't willing to show them what we do? Why are they leaving? Well, they're leaving because we didn't invite them in and spend time with them in our businesses, and quite frankly, giving them the chance to find out what they don't like.
Yep.
Because when they do come, then they might come to stay.
And
And that's when Sherry really, now is going out into the schools with all these different things to help, do, I call it kind of like career awareness, career exposure, and in the end, career alignment.
I mean, and that's a long-term commitment. These kids aren't immediately coming and working for you. These kids are in high school and grade school and whatever, and you're bringing them to the facility, showing them what you do, educating them about STEM, educating them about the opportunity in additive manufacturing. And it's a world that most people, are not able to really eloquently speak to their children about.
Right.
Because it's so new and it's radically different, and maybe it's not that new, but it's new conceptually to a lot of people, especially within this community. So those are the things that I see in how you guys are operating that show me, hey, these people get it. They're playing the long game. They care about this community. That's not a cheap endeavor to dedicate that kind of time and energy to be bringing these kids in and educating them about that. I mean, I was excited to get them introduced to my kids' school at Western Reserve, to open that door for that opportunity, because you never know. I mean, some kid may be walking through there and see something that you're doing and it strikes a chord, and then it plants that seed.
Well, it
long
does.
term.
And especially with allowing them to do these student-led tours off of the very machine that came from the YSU trustees and Jim Tressel, and trusting us with that, all the way down to fourth grade. They come in, two of them come in and learn, the plant and the machine, and then basically they can run our plant. And then a week later, they tour their friends through the lens of my friends is one of our favorite applications. And then this year we had the whole elementary teaching staff for a full in-service day at our plant. And it's life-changing, because when I realized that not a lot of our young adults actually have parents that own a manufacturing business, I was overprivileged, given the chance to. If you go back to before colleges, all of it was mentorships. Like, we would have traded our young adults back and forth, and you wouldn't have any problem telling me that they're not interested.
Yeah.
Because, job is kind of like, you don't want to get up, you can't wait to go home, and you can't wait to retire. But when you have a career, you have interest, purpose, passion, and engagement. And the only possible thing you have to have that career alignment from finding out what their interest is. When you have the interest, you have the purpose, you have the passion, and you have engagement. Now, that's a whole other story by itself.
Yep.
But quite frankly, we have a 47% turnover rate in the United States in the workplace, and we have a 47% disengagement rate. And it really is, we have a wonderful education system in Ohio, but we need a 1 hour a day class from K through 12 that's nothing but about careers.
Right.
Because isn't the goal of school a career, and education the vehicle to get us there?
Absolutely.
These teachers are falling in love with getting the chance. What we did is we separated the academic and the vocational at that point where we created colleges. We just need to find a way to put that all back together with experience-ships that go all the way down into elementary school.
Yeah.
Well, the kids, I mean, when you talk to them and you ask them, what do you want to do when you grow up? It's either I want to be an athlete, I want to be a doctor, or what their parents did, right? There's not a lot of thinking outside of the box. There's not a lot of opportunities to at least get a chance to try something new. I mean, it's exciting for them. Yeah.
We could develop books. I had given First Lady Fran DeWine a book for the library that was about what do people do all day. And then I gave it to Zach, that was one of the original industrial athletes, to take home and read with his son at night. Yep. And their neuroplasticity, we peak at like 18 or 20.
Yeah.
If we expose them to all these, and then we find, we have awareness, then we have exposure as they go up into the grade levels, I think that we could convert that 47% turnover rate, because really business is the customer of all education. And getting the opportunity to work with these amazing teachers that we have, and we learn from them.
Yep.
So, it's kind of like a completing opportunity. And then I think the saddest thing would be is if a person only ever found a job in their life and didn't find that career where it's almost like I can hardly wait to get up.
Yeah, what do you jump out of bed for?
Yep.
Right?
And I don't want to retire.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
and that's the thing that I want for my kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I want for my kids to have the same feeling that when I go to work. I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. You know, the old adage is very true, is that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, right? So I think it's wild to have that expectation that at 18 years old, we're going to ask a kid to make a decision about what they're going to do for the rest of their life when they have no idea what the options are. And when you're looking at a community like ours that has some pretty substantial pockets of generational poverty, this is why generational poverty exists, because they just don't know
Or when you throw
any other opportunity.
Yeah, and
right?
you throw in Ohio State, and everybody wants to go to Ohio State. What's $100,000 at least? You're gonna go. You're gonna live on campus. You're gonna do all these. That was normal for us when we were coming out. And how do you make that decision at 18 years old? It's hard.
Yeah. I believe that if we build, career literacy into the whole gamut from 0 to hero at 18, I believe by 8th grade, they could know within 2 or 3 things what they really want to be.
Yep.
All we have to do is develop this. And 75% of people learn by visual learning. We have all the technology to bring and breathe life into this.
Yep.
And I think my wife loves being involved with this because now, she has that opportunity to do something that helps somebody find what they love to do.
And I talked to, we had Chris Jaskowitz on a couple episodes ago, and he and I really connected on the idea that, I was an okay student, but once I realized the practical application of what I was learning, and once I learned that turned into a career, and that turned into a way to make a living, and that turned into changing an opportunity to change your zip code into something else, like learning became different, right? Because then there was a different goal in mind. Whereas school right now, learning is, well, we teach you so that you can take this test, right? And you got to take your state boards, and we have to get our funding, and we have to this, that, or the other. But if you're learning towards, creating an opportunity for the rest of your life, and you're learning towards what this looks like in terms of how you feed your family and how you get to experience life, that's an entirely different level of excitement just to go to school every day, right?
On this career engineering basically is once you find out what they want to be, then you apply, then the subjects, whether you have 5 stars or you have A through F, when you find that interest, those numbers go up. I've seen
Absolutely.
it proven
Right.
that they go up because
Yep.
you're very interested. That way you're engineering their career, but that process has to be very we have to strategically engineer that so that it starts from 0.
Yep. And I could see AI having an impact on this.
Oh, it already
in a
has.
very big way.
For such a time as this. Oh,
Right.
yeah.
And virtual reality. I know down at the YBI, they have the Explore VR where you can run through an operation from 10 different companies.
Yeah.
And you can see. I mean,
And
it's
we
better.
just they're working on completing that. We found that project very exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I recommend everybody check
Immersive.
it out. It's very fantastic.
Yeah.
It's exciting right now. I mean, I feel like we're at this pivotal moment in, the humanity, quite frankly. I mean, not to make it bigger than what it is, but the reality is that we now have these resources to learn more efficiently. We have these resources to be able to teach more efficiently in whatever way that people learn. Some people learn with their hands, some people learn with their ears, some people learn with their eyes.
Yeah.
But to your point, the more that you can engineer that learning experience to be adaptive to how you learn and what you want to learn about, it has to create exponential success for people's educational experience. I mean,
Well, and face it, whether it's somebody that's picking up our waste from our home or serving, many people you can make a career out of anything. And, basically, they get really high tips because they're passionate about what they're doing.
Yep.
So I'd say, find out what you love to do and then learn to live on that.
yeah.
Have some fun and get things done. That's what I talked about that a little bit today. It's exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get up in the morning, you're ready to go.
So let's talk a little bit about the pivot here, because the concept that we try to share here and the stories that we try to tell are the stories of failing forward, right? And the idea is that we want to shine a light on things that in that moment was a failure, in that moment was something that didn't go well, didn't go as expected, and then you ultimately learned from it and turned it into something successful down the road? Because most people, especially in today's day and age of social media, they only see the end result, right? Everybody isn't, there's an overnight 15-year success, right? It's like they don't really get to see all the things that went into creating these successful businesses like yours. And, you go from the pattern shop to ultimately now having this, ultra high tech sand core operation, and you've got these monstrous 3D printers in your facility, and you've created this industrial athlete concept. I mean, it's really a fascinating business, but how did you get there? How did you go from this pattern shop that you were working in with your father, and that was housed in one of the Humtown properties, to where you are today? What was the grand pivot that changed this for you guys?
The one thing, when your parent has a business, is to realize that it may just be when your parent owns a business, you shouldn't always think that your child is good at what you do at.
Right.
So he got me out there, and I appreciate that, because just like with his hobbies, with the pine tree farm and the bees and helping with him, the renovations, I learned something by doing. But when it came to the pattern shop, things were a lot different. A lot of people don't realize every metal shrinks differently. So he stands these 14 different 24-inch rolls up, and they're all different lengths. So we would all think that 24 inches is 24 inches. But all the metals like cast iron and gray iron and steel and aluminum, they all shrink differently. So you take the drawing, and, he always said, it'll just pop out at you. Like, in his mind, it was CAD in his brain before there was even computers.
Right. Yeah.
But it never just popped out at me. Now, I struggled to lay that out, because you had to lay it out with the rule, and then you had to have another pattern maker check it to make sure that it was right, and you used the right roll to build that. So when you build the pattern and the mold and the core box, it would all, shrink. So I would think, whether it was your father or not, it was like I was saying earlier, you wouldn't do that if you were academically for 4 years reading about pattern making.
Sure.
You had to be there in that moment.
Yep.
And he's just not getting it. Well, it's spatial perception. And some people have a higher level of that and a lower level of that. So, I did what I could until, I was 16, and then I left and went and worked at it wasn't just a service, it was a service station where, they did different things to work on the cars. And I love mechanical. Anything I could take apart in our garage at home, I would do that when I was younger. Yeah. Necessarily put it back together, but
the extra pieces for it.
Yeah, precisely. That really was an opportunity for me to learn more about customer service than I had ever learned before from Venancio Gonzalez. I mean, he taught me every aspect of not just doing or just working, but performing.
Yep.
No matter what you made, it was like, do it at your very best level. So, like if I changed a tire and I thought I didn't I didn't tighten the lug nuts, then he had me call the customer and say, I'd like to come down and check them.
Yep.
Or if the oil plug wasn't in. And then right as I was graduating, my father said, we'd like to start, a core shop so that you could be part of the business, and, you can buy in at the same value as anybody else, which I think was a really good idea. But M&W Electric, that was down in East Palestine, had core making, and they were waiting 5 weeks to get cores. So, I'd work my 40 hours where I was at, and then I'd work another 40 hours starting to put these core machines into the pattern shop. And sand and really intricate milling machines don't get along very well, because sand is abrasive. So it wasn't very long before, and it was one of those things where, my mom worked in the office, and she'd come out and help me.
Yep.
I think she felt sorry for me. I don't know, because I was getting behind. But then it exploded, and we grew that up until about 2009. We had about 220 people. We ran 3 8-hour shifts, some voluntary Sundays in there. But that was one of the breaking points. But in between there, when I saw we had I'm going to wind back. I had the opportunity with our accountant, the partner, to actually tell me, one of you three has to actually work on the business and not just in the business.
Yep. Sounds like a smart accountant.
And I took it serious, and I understudied with probably 5 different people that taught me all the aspects of accounting.
Yep.
And I really started to understand it. It was interesting to me, not that I would want to do that forever, but to learn about activity-based costing and breaking it down to the very lowest level on a job, to have a closed job report and know if it made money or didn't make money, and found that fascinating, and it is, even to this day. But, at first it was all, written ledgers and different things that you're looking at. And, I found my greatest, joy was when it was actually computers.
Yeah. Well, in that time frame, like what changed in that world for you, going from the lead time of not having a computer to that, right? You have instant information available to you.
Oh, yeah. As soon as my brother-in-law was, Bobby was a substation engineer for SCADA computers. He built power plant substations. He went to Grove City too, Sherry's brother. And from the very instant that we could, build PCs, every Saturday we would get together and build computers. Yeah. And there was this company out of Texas, Cheetah, that was one of the high-speed, PCs.
Big ones too,
we'd
right?
buy the components, for the PC, and we were always bench testing speed of memory and speed of hard drive.
Yep.
So we'd get these components. This company had built a lot of the computers for the Pentagon, and we became very good friends with them. And they would give us the newest pieces that were out. And then at that point, I was fascinated even more with the connectivity. Really it was advanced manufacturing of taking the PC, and then we built what was not known then as the human-machine interface. So we basically, in Paradox, we built what would be the equivalent, now of a, trying to think of the word.
Robot or a...
No. I said it in the interview. I'll go back and restart this, but it was
I'm trying to think too.
Yeah. It goes between the Siemens factory automation and, I don't know, do you have the notes?
End user?
Yeah, take a look and see.
A little bit. But we can keep going too.
Yeah,
see if
that's
we can
fine.
find it. Yeah.
So basically, we built in DOS the whole operating system to go between the HMI and then to go out into the plant and interconnect with the Siemens factory automation.
Okay. Yep.
And that's when it became very exciting.
Yeah.
That we could, turn valves. But, when we hit that 2009 break point, that was where all that I had learned about accounting had become very important, because we had went from the 220 people down to just, 3 that were left in production.
Okay. So this is a huge moment in the history of Humtown.
Oh, yeah.
To go from 220 employees to a handful of employees, and a lot of that was as a result of your customers that you were serving and their impact from the Great Recession. I mean, what caused that fallout to...
Well, it was deemed a Great Recession by the U.S. Treasury Department. Chrysler and GM went bankrupt, and, all of a sudden it just came to a screeching halt. And obviously you had to cut back.
Yeah, right.
And, you're looking for, what's next sometime even comes when you're in kind of a, the perfect storm, perfect financial storm. And at that point, then we were hearing that a lot of the OEMs were actually, foundries were closing down. So for one example, we did, for one of the big 3, we actually would have been 16 weeks to retool them to go onto our core machines, because every core machine and every tool is different. So I had the idea about, let's just buy the core machines. They were getting ready to cut them up. And, this OEM, said, well, we can't buy core machines, but we can pay emergency resourcing fees. and it was a large 6-digit number, and they just stroked a check, and in 2 weeks, he had said, we've never seen inside or outside of this big three automotive company anyone ever respond at that level.
Wow.
And that was rewarding. So we went around and kept doing that.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, 3 or 4 years later, that's when MIT came, and they had the production and the innovation economy.
Mm-hmm.
That was a study that they had done on companies that survived, without actually, going bankrupt. So, and then they came back again in 2016. And when they came back in 2016, MIT had also been where the technology was licensed from 4X1 3D sand printers.
Okay, so this is where the reinvention starts to happen. Is now in 2016, is they've seen you survive this. They've seen your grit and agility to get through this period of time, and now all of a sudden you're walking into this world of 3D printing.
Well, yeah. Or do you want to? If we go back, there was another portion of that.
Yeah.
So along with the 2009, we also had to do the emergency resourcing to pull out of it.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing is how do we turn around our inefficiencies?
Yeah.
Because even the first job that we took on for the visual learning system was actually the Chrysler front engine cover set. And basically, we were running that, 8-hour shift, with the 220 people, about 150 in production. And that job was probably running at 80% of rate, almost 90, kind of like a break-even job. And so it was like, well, understood all this about accounting, went up and studied Lincoln Electric. And, they have a once a year, really nice once a year bonus, and really good in good years. And so I'm thinking, I have all this IT inside of me and all this accounting. It was like, it was kind of like a divine intervention of how am I going to save this company? So I'm doing the emergency resourcing, and I'm going, we got to find a way to get people engaged.
Yeah.
So that was when algorithmically we take the labor portion of every job and we deliver it from that, through that whole automation system into the Siemens automation. And then when they cycle the machine, they actually they build their own earning rate, with basically their thinking and their productivity,
Right.
And they basically are taking it from a fixed rate into whatever they can do with their skills, abilities, and performance.
Yeah.
And
that's up on the screen, right? Everyone could see it
Oh,
at
yeah.
the same time.
Yeah, it started out originally that I came up with an idea of doing it with direct hours, and if we make the week, then everybody, will get some portion of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't very specific. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like riding on a 2-seater bike, and it's getting really hard pedaling uphill, and the guy or the gal in the back isn't pedaling.
Yeah.
So I think we really need to break this down at a lot deeper level, and that then was when each machine as it logs in actually then, and this is to the point of the I think it was like 5 years before we got the patent on the visual learning system, and then it took another couple of years to get gamification.
Right.
I kind of see that when you're like on the pinball, you have the highest score, so like we have the top 10, and some people hold all top 10 spots. Mm-hmm. So manufacturing can be a little bit. To some people it can be repetitive, and so this actually takes that and makes that mundane come alive. It makes it exciting for them to interact with their peers.
Yeah, it creates the two things that every business should want. It creates alignment and it creates equity.
Right.
And alignment, from my perspective, is as simple as the business owner and the employees historically don't have the same goals, right? In the traditional manufacturing space, the business owner says, I want to make as much profit as possible. Mm-hmm. And the employee says, I want to make as much money as possible. And that money is typically driven by the confines of hours, right? It's not driven by the confines of, if the company makes more money, I make more money. Right. So there's just historically in the manufacturing industry been this huge misalignment of ownership in the workforce. And that creates all kinds of problems. When you look at a facility like GM, and there's a lot of great things that have happened in our community as a result of GM. But I remember hearing the stories of people that would say, yeah, I just kind of hid for 20 years.
Yeah. I can't believe they shut down.
And
that's kind of what happened.
And I don't want to, say that, it's unionization or it's this, that, or the other, but there's always that mentality of like, I have my own incentives as an employee, you have your incentives as an employer, and they're not the same. So, when you can create that alignment where you're both thinking about the same thing every day, then you've got something where you can do something as a group. And one of the things that we love to talk about is creating equity with your employees, because when you can crack that code and you can create equity with your employees, they're bought in. They're excited about what you're doing. Their success is your success and vice versa. And a lot of people tend to think that equity means I got to have an ownership stake. I got to be on the cap table. I have to get a K1 at the end of the year. But the reality of the situation is it's not that. There's people that have actual ownership in a business and they still don't feel like they have equity in it because they're not allowed to be part of that, experimental phase and figuring out how to make things that work. So, that to me was something that really resounded when we talk about your business, is that you are leading this charge, especially locally. I don't know many other businesses. I know that we have a lot of similarities in how we, create that alignment. We've gamified a lot of our process with our employees, but you're way ahead of the curve on this one in terms of a lot of manufacturing. And so now, you talk about that 47% turnover, right? And you've got how many employees now roughly at Humtown?
About 80 right now between both plants.
Okay, so we've gone from 220 employees down to 3. You saw this huge opportunity to create now. If we're going to rebuild this, we're going to rebuild it the right way with efficiency and alignment and equity and all these things. What's your turnover rate look like today?
It's between 5 and 7%. That has a lot to do with our firm where we it came basically as some accounting input again, where they had this system from Profiles International out of Texas that was bought out by the Wiley Group that looked at the thinking style, the interest, and the behavior, not of the person, but of the position. And then it looks at the person. So it's not a test. At school, we're making everything a test. There are really things called an assessment. And really, it was so engaging to me to learn about it. The person that was selling that system around the area was an industrial engineer. I hired him for about 1.5 years to come in and look at every one of our positions on our team and build the template for that, for the thinking style, interest, and behavior. And then as we moved through it, then when we started moving away from hiring into recruiting, scouting and recruiting, is to then you do the person. And this is part of the career alignment.
Yep.
Well, I found is, interest is the most important factor. But then, you have the thinking style, and the behaviors that go along with that. So probably the best way I would explain it is that, you can have the thinking style and the interest to be a pilot. But a fighter jet pilot, their behavior and the behavior of a C-130 are entirely different. And you have the same thing on a football team. And, that's where my fascination came, to, and my point about, I don't think we really need any more people, in Ohio. We just need to get them into their interests.
Right.
And if we start doing this from zero to hero, you can start at the end, the middle, and the bottom. You can start in all 3 at one time. But the best thing, back to that pine tree farm analogy, is, you've got a seedling to a Christmas tree. Here you have a baby. They learn, they can learn by hearing things that we don't. That's why I like to see them as young adults.
Yep.
Because they have such capacity for learning. And in that band of their neuroplasticity, that we need to pour that that, that hour a day into them, over the careers, whether it's, a parent reading to them when they're 6 months old, or as you're going along through K through 12. And all the way along, you're developing that by 8th grade, the goal of finding out what their 2 or 3 career choices are. We don't think they're capable. They're more than capable to do that.
Yeah, when you motivate humans appropriately,
and you have the right material,
right,
and you make it engaging to learn what those things are, it's kind of like, instead of visual earnings, it's visual learnings. And
right.
that's kind of where we're kind of focusing towards, is like a career U with what we've had the opportunity to do, with the schools and the youth. But you have to have a clear goal. Like, a lot of my friends in school said, "Why am I here?" That wouldn't happen if you had it where you were basically saying, "Hey, we're doing," and you can make all kinds of games, and you can make it fun until you are finding that, and you don't spend all day. It's a curriculum.
Yeah,
it's a curriculum that's way past its time to be developed, and then that's the same thing at the shop. No clear goal. Like, when I wanted to convert all of our process to be digital end to end in 2010, we accomplished that. From quote all the way to, the slip signed by the drivers electronically.
Everything electronic in between there.
Everything. And
in 2010.
4.0.
Yeah.
But the most important thing was the fact that when you quote a job on a press, it's usually 20 pieces an hour, 30 pieces an hour. Well, once you quote that, and then you take all of your costs, you deliver a quote. And when that quote's accepted, that means they accepted the price, and that 20 pieces an hour is the rate.
Yep.
Well, what happened for years on why incentives programs really don't work is because the trust is lost. So what happens is, one part of an industrial engineer's important, career is that they will go out and do time studies. And okay, well, if you can get, 20, now you can get 22, you can get 24. And this is without re-quoting the job back to the customer. So I am the guardian of that system, that we don't change the rate unless we have to change the quote. So we were doing a large project for a aviation fueling system company, a very large company. And they wanted a lower price, and it's more common for the larger corporations to want to squeeze, the price down a little bit. And I take that very personally. I went out, and talked to them and said, "Hey, if we want to keep this job, and it makes work and it keeps jobs and keeps us working, we have to, take the rate up by, 4 pieces an hour." Isn't it funny when when you're really connected to something and you believe in it, is that I looked at that machine for the first time in 6 years. I didn't realize that when the die closed, that then the material hopper took 7 seconds to move over. So I called our Siemens programmer, Mike, up in Cleveland. He was out walking his dog, and I told him exactly the programming change I needed. I need this to close simultaneous. So we did re-quote the job, and they got the lower price. But we actually made more money on that job, and not just on that job, but every job.
Yeah.
Just that 7 seconds.
Right.
The efficiency created there.
Yeah, it wasn't
amazing.
It was
no
the
wasted
machine
moment.
cycle time we changed, not just the job cycle time.
Yeah.
So that's why we love the tagline, always innovating. I mean, you can innovate in everything that you do, as long as you can have a problem. I don't even like to use the word problem, but basically, when the problem becomes when the problem, you think on it too long, instead of seeing it like a sport and a challenge to overcome it.
Yep.
And that day when I shared that with them, they come up with better ideas than I do all the time. But there's that story again. Am I giving you a fish, or am I teaching you how to fish?
Yep.
And then they look for these changes all the time, because now you've taken them out of kind of what I call pay rate jail, which limits your thinking and limits your ability to take. It's not about being better or bigger. It's about being the best different that you are. And they all have different levels of mechanical abilities and electronic abilities, but that's where completing is more important than competing, because they know that if they learn something it's going to affect that top 10 sport, that they have.
And I mean, if you like, there's some interesting parallels to when we talk about teaching kids in school and this process is that if you teach to the average student, then you're leaving out the opportunity of those ability for those real top performers. And then you're losing the opportunity to really elevate those people below the line too.
Yeah.
So, what I see in your system is that it allows for the high performers to perform high and be compensated appropriately. Those that have maybe better technical skills or problem solving skills or this, that, or the other. But while you're giving that larger opportunity for those people, it's also not forgetting the others, because then you're just showing them, if you do this, if you watch how this person does it, if you ask them questions about maybe how they're doing it, then you can find your own way to success rather
it inspires them.
Yeah, I mean,
to innovate.
Otherwise, as an employer, at the end of the year, you get people that come to you and say, "I want to make more money," right? And you look at them and you say, "We need to work more," right? But in this scenario, I'm not coming to Mark and saying I need to make more money.
It happens in real time.
I know what I need to do to make more money.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially in this day and age, and this is why I think, Mark, you're so far ahead of the curve on this, is that the next generation, and I say the next generation as like millennials and Gen Z below, we've had a phone in front of us the majority of our adult life. We've had the internet. We've had the ability to immediately get gratification for whatever it is that we're doing or looking for. In this environment, you're creating that opportunity for immediate gratification, right? As opposed to like just put in your time, kid, and one day you'll make money.
No,
right?
you become your own industrial engineer,
right.
At least that facet of it, to see in real time that what you did makes it better. And the real idea in the right environment is, let's say that it loses production by 25% with their change. Mm-hmm. That you never say, hey, look, you lost me money. What you say is, what did you learn from that?
Right, right. Yeah.
And you don't even need to say it in a real-time environment like that. I mean, that's kind of where the matrix came to life for me, was the fact that we're now intersecting data in real time. I mean, we do it with our watches. Mm-hmm. I mean, but there's so many areas that are still unaffected with real-time data. Look at the stock market when you used to have to call and get the price. I mean, who's doing that? I mean,
now, they're going 24 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
People are talking about pushing that to 7. That's going to change the whole dynamic of that process.
Yeah.
Fast.
But I mean, so I just continue to be fascinated by this whole concept and think that, why haven't more people figured this out? We've taken a very similar approach to our team members. We incentivize, we gamify. We want to give people the room to experiment, because
and that's it.
That's when great things happen, right? You're never
like
going to get
better.
better.
Chrysler job.
Yeah.
What happened on that job was, in the summertime, the resin that holds the sand together gets very sticky when it gets hot. And even though, we have air conditioning, it doesn't get rid of all the humidity and the heat. So we were having to clean that machine down like every 6 hours, and sometimes even in between. Mm-hmm. And so I call them MacGyverisms. I love to watch MacGyver. And it has nothing to do with dating. It's just the fact that, thinking like that was science. So dry ice. Dry ice has no moisture. But dry ice doesn't just come in blocks for when you're out fishing. It comes in rice.
Yeah.
We were putting tens of thousands of pounds of sand and blending it in with the sand. And we were able to go like 40 hours without having to clean the machine down.
From 3 or 6 at the most to 40.
Right.
Yeah.
And we would have been late had we not done that. I didn't have the time to buy the sand cores and do all the engineering to put that in. And when it became October, the temperature problem went away. It was temporary. I don't value the fact that I thought of that, or I had, divine inspiration or whatever it was. I applaud the opportunity that they see that and create even greater opportunities of innovation. Yeah. I think going back to what you're talking about is you never, ever, never change that rate.
Right.
Because when you do, the whole system will be broken. And that's why I don't call it incentive. I call it visual earnings.
Right.
And the idea has to work in the fact that, it doesn't really concern me if they earn more than I do, because they've earned it.
Right.
It's not paid. It's an earning factor. It isn't and yeah, it could be the money, but they're innovative.
Yeah.
And they're creative.
And you've created a culture of innovation.
And I have fun
of
just seeing when they innovate new ideas around it. You know what I mean? So what you're doing is you're taking away the box, and you're not limiting their potential. You're allowing them to be empowered to, self-manage. I wouldn't even use that word. They're empowered to release their potential. Greatest energy on earth.
I'd venture to guess that this is, if not one of the largest reasons that your turnover is only 5 to 7%.
Well, it helps.
Smashing industry competition, because you're no longer putting people in a box, and you're saying, we're not just going to do things the way that Mark tells you to do them. We're going to give you the opportunity to innovate, and we're going to leverage the power of this group being the smartest person in the room, and we're going to do great things together. And that's what people want.
In every cycle, on the screens that we have, I can see that. And the higher it goes, the more I'm inspired that they're being creative, and they're, I can't say that they're an engineer, but they're basically, thinking in real time about every cycle. Oh, I tried this, it went up a little. I tried this, it went down a little bit. And then they, if they're a team, they actually synthesize where the operator is actually wants to put out the best parts, so he's not slowed down by the people that are actually doing the finishing, on the part. And it could be applied to many different things, but you have to come up with what the quantity is with it. Yeah. It might take 24 hours to build a car, but that's why the accounting becomes critical, because you have to figure out a way to algorithmically determine the time on that, and then put it into the computer program. But nothing's impossible.
Right. Everything is figure-outable. Right?
I love that word. Yeah.
So, I think that there's the question that I have when it comes to incentive programs, because ultimately, I know you don't call it an incentive program, but this is at its core an incentive plan, an incentive program to incentivize people to do things that they want and you want, and create alignment. Typically what happens in an incentive plan is that you incentivize people to do something, and then almost always you disincentivize them to do something else, right? And that's just the nature of the beast in trying to balance all of these things. So when you're incentivizing people to, work harder, produce more output, and, they're seeing some financial reward as a result of that incentivization, there's risk that you reduce quality on the other side of the equation. Right. So how do you factor quality into this gamification process? So say somebody makes all these cores, they get done, their rate is great because they got out of the door in a less than projected amount of time. It goes to the customer, and the customer looks at it and says, this isn't the quality that I expected. Or it goes to your QC department, and this isn't the quality that I expected. When it has to go back through the process, are those people then being dinged, or is that taken off? How does that factor into the equation if you've got a quality problem?
One of the other things that we did, and there were a lot of them, probably can't cover them all, but there was a product that was developed, it was kind of out of the YBI. It was called Ving. Okay. And we have that system, and, the fact that, we have, Dave Arthur is, with the program, we connected that program in. A lot of process sheets over the years were sent out as a piece of paper on the bulletin board or an email, and especially when you're doing the incentive system, your time is money. But we deliver those process sheets. There were a lot of different parts to the patent on this system. We actually take the process sheet. We hired a person that does for medical records, that makes these process sheets up that are delivered when they log into the machine. It brings the process sheet up, and if there's some type of a customer issue, and there aren't a lot of them, it comes up with a quality alert that actually goes from the PC to the HMI into the Siemens and actually stops the PLC, and it comes up with this quality alert, and then they see that. The thing is, they have a good culture to record or not record the part is a good part. And our scrap rate on that front engine cover went from up towards 10% to less than 3%.
Wow.
Because they own it,
Yep.
that part. And it, if it comes back later and they, it would, come off of their, their incentive. So, I mean, that was unbelievable. We used to have to go up and report on that job, every month on why the scrap rate was higher than their own. Well, we were so much lower than they own. They said, don't come back.
Yeah.
It's the first time they said, don't come back, and you're okay with it.
Yeah.
And we have, it's kind of like, back with the old Maytag commercials, all very, very, very few quality problems because these processes that are delivered in real time don't take a lot of time.
Yeah.
And it allows them, especially with the quality alerts as being an exception, and with it, basically coming up with all that real-time interaction happens very quickly, and it's at the right time.
So to those that are listening that are thinking about their business and how to implement something like this, if you don't have a single source of truth, if you don't have that one pillar IT infrastructure or data, centralized source, it gets really hard to be able to communicate effectively and to minimize disruption and to minimize downtime, to minimize any, quality issues at the end of the day. So your system is continuously not only showing things about profitability and operational success, but also flagging and saying, hey, we might have a quality issue or watch out for something like this. And then the entire team is incentivized to make sure that all that data continues to stay within that centralized system. So walk us through how the visual learning system works on the shop floor. So I walk in to walk up to my 3D printer to work on this project that I've got going on. What's that look like?
Well, and that brings up a good element about safety. You have to have a safety certificate. All of this again back to 2008 is that you have a card that if your certification ran out, then the machine won't even let you log in.
Cool.
It gives you the aspect of quality, safety, quality, and performance. And then those sheets that are coming in. So basically, when you log in, then after it's passed you on your certification, the die that's on that machine, back then we put in a barcode identification. You can put the wrong die in the machine, but it won't run. So that's tied into that. So we're protecting them from running the wrong part. And then when they come into the environment of logging into the job and they see if there's a safety, certificate that came up for, say if there happened to be, in a rare case, that something, in always innovate a new mistake. Don't make the same one twice.
Right, yeah.
The phone call, don't make one at all, but you don't want the phone call to go towards I repeated that error. And that's the whole idea of delivering the process sheets, in real time to them. But then they log into it shows them production quantity. It shows the top 10, and then obviously they can, talk to if one of the top 10 was higher than them, they can talk to that person and they can ask them how they did it, but it's still a matter of performance.
Yeah.
So, you're doing this mind shift from, workplace to performance center when they're actually combining their skills, abilities, and performance.
So do you see that happening if somebody is lower on the leaderboard than others and you've got somebody that's consistently at the top of that leaderboard? Do you see people going to that leader and saying,
they can ask.
How are you doing this?
But it still takes your level of performance.
Yeah,
they can get a technique. They can get, tips for, because all dies run differently. But basically, they may ask them a question or two, but it's your level of performance.
Yep.
I mean, if you're under the old system where it's just under a pay rate, there's not really any opportunity to expand your skills, abilities, and performance. No. So that's the fun part, is to see that actually happen. But remember, that still goes all the way back to the thinking style, the interest, and the behavior of having an operator that's a high performer.
Yep.
And that's where we basically wrote the Go for Gold for the, where we bring in the new candidate or the emerging industrial athlete, and they actually play between the HR coach and that candidate, and then if they can beat the HR coach, they get a gift card.
Yeah.
So if part of that engineering template is an athleticism, then you're going to see that or not see that, and at the same time they're going, what am I doing coming to work somewhere where I'm playing a game? You know what I mean? But you might as well introduce it to them, in the interview so that, they have an idea of what that's like.
Right. And I mean, this is where the definition of industrial athlete comes in to play here. And we've talked about this before, where industrial doesn't necessarily mean only manufacturing. It's
no,
of any
because
industry.
you have the insurance industry, you have the medical industry. Yep. Even on the cover of the book, it's showing over here is medical and over here is, you have all kinds of industries that are across the board. And that's why it doesn't say the manufacturing athlete. It says the industrial athlete.
Well, even we talked about it a little bit too, getting into just esports and different things like that. These are all this is what the kids are doing. They're in there every day. They're trying to win. Why not put it into our lives every day?
Well, that's why should it just have to be for at home? It should be all across the world.
Yep.
You could have actually professional Olympic between the same industries. You could, they could compete in real time all around the world. And then instead of being disengaged, then they'd be engaged,
Constantly, too.
Yeah.
I mean, they're constantly thinking about it, iterating, trying new things.
I don't even know where it could go. I just know that that's what's next.
Yep.
And that's going to be the and then that's why we went with the shorter, performance period. What really happened was back when I was trying to engineer a way out of the Great Recession, was I would make it at the last minute to my we had the ice zone here, and two of our sons actually played, and I'd be showing up with my notebook on what I was working on to save it, and I'm looking out there and I'm going, wow, they're not just showing up. They're not just working. They're performing.
Yep.
And that led a lot to the first visit from now Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel, but Coach in 2014.
We don't even know what to call him now. It's Coach Tressel. It's President Tressel. It's Vice Lieutenant Governor Tressel. It's Your Honor. I don't know what to even call him at this stage in the game, because he's a hero to our community.
Oh yeah.
He's somebody that Youngstown wouldn't be where it is today in this reemergence and this reinvention of itself if it isn't for Jim. Yeah. I know that I've seen his work. I've been involved with his Leadership Institute at YSU. His podcast. I mean, he's a saint. I mean, I tell people that aren't familiar with Jim in this community that Jim's one of the few people that could shoot someone in the street and everybody would look around and say, that person probably deserved it.
Probably, right? Yeah.
So, you're talking about this mentality of this industrial athlete, and you're seeing, the hockey players competing and showing up differently.
It's a mindset.
It's this mindset shift, right?
Bring that performance mindset into what people call the workplace.
Yeah. And so what better way to bring one of the greatest coaches of all time and one of the greatest people that understands the brain of an athlete,
right, to now come together and think about this concept of the industrial athlete. Transformational. So
talk a little bit more about your relationship with Lieutenant Governor Tressel and how this kind of played into the industrial athlete. How did he get tied into this? How did he learn about this?
He came in 2014. I was having locker room meetings, once a week, where I would share, whether it was a TED Talk or an idea of something, and he came to speak to one of them, and he was,
talk about wanting to run through a wall after a meeting.
He actually, he actually, he stayed as long as it took, for each person that wanted to talk to him, like he does in all ways. He's, always, there for you.
Mm-hmm.
He's more of that person that, he gives in to people.
Yeah.
And we learn from all that. A lot of times we're trying to get when we really should be giving. Mm-hmm. And when you give in, you do end up with some things in return. But that actually helped synthesize going from the hockey and the performance mindset to the industrial, athlete mindset. And, it's been a long journey since then. And that's, the book, Dr. Tim Figley, came along, and I was always trying to do, business development, and actually business development is people development.
Mm-hmm.
So since he had actually, he went to, when Lieutenant Governor Jim was he was teaching leadership over at Akron. He actually took that, and that kind of led to putting this all together to writing the book, and then Jim forwarding it, because we do want to move forward, and we do want to continue to update the operating. It's called the industrial athlete operating system, is the idea that we have to keep trying to build the winner inside of the person.
Mm-hmm.
And you win games by having winners.
Yep.
You don't just win games.
Right.
And that's what I learned, a lot from him, was about being others minded and more selfless. Our company is like many other ones. We're trying. I'm not trying to be better or bigger than anybody. Trying to be different, and trying to realize that question about asking the right question, meaning, why can't I find good employees, is, maybe ask the question, why can't I be a better CEO?
Right.
And that coach empowering others.
That is a responsibility as a business owner, as a CEO. It's your responsibility to look inward, right? And to say, we talk to people all day long, and they say to me, oh, I can't find good help. I can't find good people. Very few of them are willing to look at themselves and say, what am I doing wrong? Right. Because in their mind, it's like, well, there's always somebody else to blame. Right. It's like, we got to blame this person because this didn't go well. The businesses that really, truly do well are the ones that look at themselves and say, we must be doing something wrong. And you have to, because you look around, even in our community where, we've had a lot of tough times since the steel mills left, but there are some great businesses in this community that have great people. Yeah. So what are they doing?
And what can I do better?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. Mm-hmm.
If you're always a work in progress and in continuous improvement of yourself, then the company has a better chance of actually getting better.
And you drive into that every day. And Mark, I know you talked about the coach empowering others. That's what CEO stands for. Right. Every day when you take that mindset and you're driving everyone around you, and the team is important, if they believe that that's really what you're there for and what you're doing every day, they're going to show up and they're going to do some great things.
Coach empowering others.
I stole it from him.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing, Mark.
It is.
Because it is. I mean, that's your job. I mean, a friend of mine, our founder of our platform that we're a part of, David Wurzbacher, says, you're the chief repeating officer, right? Yeah. And coach empowering others. And that's the flip of the whole mentality, is that show people what it means to them rather than go work hard for me. Yeah. Right? Because going and working hard for me is typically a temporary thing. You can get Mel Gibson and Braveheart rallying the troops and getting everybody pumped for a short period of time. But if you want longevity of success and you want people to really buy in to what you've got, they got to know what it means to them.
And we talked about it before. Tim, I give you a ton of credit for this. The question is always, what tools do you need to move forward and just get things done without me? I mean, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, what can I get out of the way?
Every single day. That's exactly what happens.
When like as coach, Tressel, you're without the electronics, they were empowering them to go out onto that field without, the coach going out on the field.
Right.
So they had to make all those decisions, and that's where when somebody does something, even if it's, a $10,000 mistake, as long as they're, a passionate, committed, team member, you're not going to say, you lost me money. You're going to say, what did you learn from that?
Right.
There's some lessons.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And what will you do differently the next time? Because the last thing you want to do is make a person feel bad. Failure is an event, not a person. But you'll lock up all that potential. You do that one time, and you're going to lock up all the potential of that person to ever try something different ever again.
Right. And that's what you want.
Because
you want
I've made the same mistake.
Yeah.
Did I say that to myself? Did I scold myself? No.
No.
You know,
And Jim just had Jim Kelly on the other day. I had to bring up the Buffalo Bills beating the Chiefs yesterday one time. But no, I mean, you listen to him, and when he talks to you, you feel like you're the only person in the world. Like, he just looks at you, and you're like, nothing else matters. Like, this guy is focused on me completely.
listen to understand.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that hurts a little bit. It's fine. You know,
We all have to be working towards something.
we're gonna win the game that matters, Billy. Don't worry. You know, Billy's a big Bills fan. I'm a big Chiefs fan. So you know, we know where the record stands at the end of the day. But
I'm a big Penguins fan.
that's good. That's the right. That's the right person.
Same. Yeah.
Okay, so you wrote this book, The Industrial Athlete Operating System. You've got, you know, the foreword by Coach Lieutenant President Tressel. And in 2020, you guys won the National Association of Manufacturer of the Year award, beating out like IBM.
Yeah.
I mean, this is bonkers. I mean, to me, is that we've got this small in the scope of relativity manufacturing company in Youngstown, Ohio, that is showing up and beating out organizations that are known for, you know, innovation and known for, you know, creating unbelievable products. Tell me a little bit more about that experience, what you learned from that, what you took home from that, how that made you feel to be recognized on that stage.
That really goes quite a ways back to the, you know, the fabric of our community. And we actually had a mountain done with all the flags up there, because that goes way back to the combination of the Youngstown Business Incubator, you know, and Barb, and then you know YSU and Dr. Brett Connor, and you know us. Brandon was, you know, a lead on this, and they actually, the power of completing over competing sent him out to UNI because they didn't have that printer, and he went out and kind of became an semi-adopted son to Dr. Jerry Thiel. And, you know, he was out there bringing this technology of 12 weeks of waiting for tooling to toolingless. Because our plant in Columbiana is tooling, and the one in Boardman is toolingless. So now you can design something and the very next day be printing the sand cores, and maybe in the same day be casting.
Wow.
So before, we had only ever worked directly for the foundries. Now, you know, Brandon was going, you know, we signed probably over 400 NDAs with some of the leading companies in the world, because they want that speed to market. They want that industrial Amazon button. They want to hit that and hit it and ship it, you know.
Yep.
And it was just such a game changer. You know, he started going all over the United States and the world helping these people, to the point where then there was a grant written with Barb Ewing and the YBI and Dr. Brett Connor and then Humtown, you know, for that printer. Actually, it involved 3 universities, which is even more about compete on the football field, but complete between them. They were completing that was written between Carnegie for architectural casting. It was Penn State for casting, and design for YSU. So they were all 3 written in that grant, and there was really no place to put it. So then we provided all the, you know, the building and all the, you know, the people and the materials and the, you know, all the maintenance for the machine. And, you know, it's been, I call it EI is the future, educational integration. And when that happened for us to be able to do that, then we couldn't help but want to do it for the schools, you know,
Right.
With being on the board and starting to realize that we need to, they are our future emerging industrial athletes. How we see people is how we treat people. And I wasn't doing a very good job of opening my company up and letting it be a classroom.
Yep.
So in winning that award, you know, it wasn't about beating somebody out. It was about, you can be one person and outthink a whole team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But this was a collaborative ecosystem. And, you know, it won the Manufacturer of the Year, the Engineering Award, you know, over all the other OEMs that were out there. And it was about helping the other OEMs to be able to accelerate their speed to market with some amazing technologies, even engines that now require no head gasket, no head bolts. You're now designing an engine that could never be made with tooling, that can have unimaginable compression, and it would be kind of like the equivalent of trying to say that the world is flat when we know it's round. But back then, they were sure it was flat and it wasn't round.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And we had all these engineering standards that were locked up in tooling.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to refresh and reboot the mindset of the engineers.
Yep.
To say, yeah, we can make an engine without a head gasket.
Science is different now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And shatter that two-dimensional world. Yeah, you can have CAD, but you still had limitations that were put there with mindsets that needed to shift. And this was not just a Humtown thing. It was a whole ecosystem thing over, not an ecosystem thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it wasn't the award. That mountain had all the flags on it. I kept going back to Brendan and say this person was part of it. This person was part of it. And it didn't have the personal as much as it had the community impact.
Right.
To set that actually was one for Ohio, for all those universities, all those people that helped. So in that ecosystem award, it was one more thing that was saying, we're not the Rust Belt, we're the Tech Belt.
That's right. Yeah.
And what does that mean for the future of aerospace? And that is the most exciting thing. I'm just thinking forward 20, 50 years. Yeah.
Wow. And it happened here.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Right.
Some, at one point, more machines than anywhere in the world, and in that one building, and so. Yeah, and now we have a machine in Dusseldorf, Germany, and a joint venture, and one in Highland Park, California.
So 2020,
all because of this ecosystem.
Right. It shined a light on a different perspective. And to your point, you get to the mountain as a result of everybody's collective effort.
Exactly.
Right. And then again in 2024, another National Association of Manufacturing Award for transformational business culture. And that
was
ties
the one
back
around the visual earning system.
Right.
Yeah.
It all ties back to this mentality of like giving the problems to the team and saying, let's work on this together. Let's make this a group effort. Let's make it an ecosystem success rather than any individual success. So
well, and even here in Marco Island here in May of 25 this year, we run the Collaborative Ecosystem Award, which was really won by the students doing these student-led tours. Now, of the 13 finalists, from IBM down to I think Pella Windows, I didn't know. I didn't want to ask a parent and their child to go all the way to Florida when we were one of 13 of all these companies. You're kind of thinking that, well, hey, we won as a community by us being down on stage.
Yep.
But when she opened that award, and there were two, there was one for Whirlpool and one for Humtown for collaborative ecosystems. They were rebuilding washing machines, 350 of them now that they give to people that are in need, which was really, truly, an amazing award. And this was for these student-led tours, which when they tour their friends and their peers, 4th grade to 12th grade through, it's so much more engaging when it's peer-to-peer than just, me as an owner, generationally not as relevant, to take them through there. And they basically feel like a career hero.
Yeah.
And that to me is the award. There's no real reward in an award unless it changes somebody else's life for the better.
Yep. So the other thing I want to bring up, you've had this industrial athlete book, which I'm so aligned with, and I love all of the, theories that are kind of told in that book. And then you've got another one called Value Ship.
Yeah. That
Y-O-U, Y-O-U ship. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what it means to you?
I think for a long time, including myself, you have the value of an antique, the value of gold, the value of basically the VALUE of things. And actually, we're the most incredible innovation that will ever be on Earth. And we lose track of that sometimes. And the bottom line is we have thousands of books written on leadership. But until a person can really value themselves, we've had some people that have had amazing amounts of people following them, but to the demise of people even. So the really, if you're building a road like the Romans built, you engineer the substrate. So the real fundamental basis of leadership has to be built on valueship. And finding and determining that you have overflowing value in yourself. And when you look in the mirror, that you're thinking of, I'm not better, I'm not bigger, I'm different. And I think a lot of times people, even twins, are not identical, in the way that they think. And that's why I think it's incredibly important for a real true leadership is trying to value yourself enough that you want that person to be the best version, the best different of who they are. And that's the basis, of the valueship, is finding that the preciousness, because if you feel that you're flawed, then you're moving to the cup is half empty.
Right.
How do you overflow into other people for them to become the leader that they could be by trying to make them a copy of you? And that's where the completing over the competing comes in. So I think more of the competing comes up when people don't find the true value of themselves to overflowing so that they can, and it's a work in progress for me. It was kind of a discovery, over the last few years, and being around people that are trying to be selfless and, others-minded.
And being others-minded is a theory and thesis in and of itself and how to properly operate a business. I tell people that, like, I have a lot of parallels between being a father and being a business owner and being an entrepreneur, is that, my job is to be the guardrails.
Right.
My job is to be the guardrails as a dad. My job is to be the guardrails as the business owner. The substrate is there, the road is there. I'm going to be the guardrail. Sometimes you're going to veer a little bit this way, a little bit this way, but my job is to just make sure to keep you on that road forward.
Right.
And that's the culture that you've created in your organization, is that everybody's working towards staying on that road and moving forward and not just staying still.
Well, and I think part of that is, too, that everybody has a brand. People talk about branding. That branding starts with us as parents helping our children find their own brand. And then at a certain point, they take the training wheels off, which is us. And everything it's like a currency. And that's what it gets into in the book, is that, you're either, if you say something bad about somebody else, you're really taking away from your brand. You think you're taking away from theirs. So if a parent can get them to the point, where they're building their brand and not, like we have like this old house and restore this old car, and all these different things that have value. But to rebuild people, that's what I think, whether it be in a company or it be in, in your personal relationship or, relationships with clubs or groups or whatever, is that everybody has something that can add value to that. But if you don't have that from yourself, then, it makes it difficult to transfer. So you got to think of it like a currency every day, kind of like your brand is like the stock market. So everything you think, say, and do. And, the more I've thought about that, the more I realize that, it's kind of like a way of life.
Yeah.
As the parent or the business owner, to your point, exactly.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite meetings too. We talk about having some of the younger staff come into the office. They don't have a ton of experience. They have different experience.
Right.
I love to have them sit in the meetings with us and just listen and ask them, what do you think? What would you do?
Yeah.
It expands the horizon of potential, and you really get some new ideas. Some of them are horrible, and some of them are amazing.
Yeah.
You just have to listen and take it all in.
Yeah.
Take the best and leave the rest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've got two things that I want to kind of get to as we button this up. You're leading a charge and inspiring others about, how to look at business differently and how to operate a business differently, whether you know that or not. People are paying attention. And you've referenced a YouTube video called "The End of Work as We Know It." It's a huge statement. What do you mean by that? What do you think that means? And what's something that people should be taking away from that theory of the end of work as we know it and applying to their business today?
To use a term that Disney came up with, Imagineering, it's like moving from that by having the interest and moving towards performing over working is like reimagining, in real time, how performance centers would look different than workplaces, and realizing and always understanding you can't see it all yourself, but how different would it look if all the esports were in every application, of everybody getting up every day. And, not everybody loves to compete the same as somebody else, but, then there are careers where you don't necessarily have to do that. But where it can apply is now instead of esports having to be at home, they can actually help people earn money, and compete.
And I mean, just all the terms that you use in describing business, I love. It's the idea of the industrial athlete, not employees, the idea of a performance center than a workplace, and it's like if we were focused on results-focused businesses rather than input-focused businesses. In our industry, it's like timesheets.
Right.
Everybody hates tracking every 8 minutes of their day, and it's soul-sucking, right? But it's like
it's not fun.
when you can move into here's a results-focused thing. Then it just feels different, and it feels like you're a part of something better, and you're not just kind of grinding away at one thing, and you're part of something bigger than that. So,
well, it goes from basically watching the game to being in real time in the game.
You're in it, yeah. Right.
So how do we convert all these different algorithms and work standards into a digital economy?
Yep.
Yeah. Over time, I feel like you lose a little bit of that. Once you get into the workplace, I remember being young, high school, college, I wanted to beat everybody at everything all the time. It didn't matter what it was. And then you slowly kind of lose a little bit of that edge, and then you find something that gets you back into it like this, and you just can't stop thinking about it, can't stop talking about it.
Yeah.
So something that you guys talked about a little bit in the call the other day was, there's some things that we've done in our business that people have looked at us and said, what are you thinking? Why are you doing this? This doesn't make sense. This, maybe, not seeing the clear alignment between, the expense and the actual output. But you guys are spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on food for your team at your facilities. Like all the food and drinks are free for people. What's the thought process behind that with you guys there?
Well, quite frankly, vending machines take up a lot of time. So it comes out actually at net zero when the machine isn't working. They have to call in,
or they're leaving, right? They got to go get lunch.
Do either one of you have vending machines at home for your family?
No, sir. I should.
So then why would you have them with your home team family? Quite frankly, if you do time studies and that on it really is draining. Our atmosphere is, semi clean, but it's not, it's not hospital clean. So you have dust and dirt and that. I watched endlessly where people, lose a lot of time, and the other thing is too, if, we're still working on how to convert that into the 3D sand printing because that machine cycles for 18 hours by itself. So, in Columbiana, you've got to imagine if you're running it, 5 times the rate, that you might not take that 20-minute break because you want to go back out and start the game early.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's if they have to go get change or if it's not working and then they had to write up, the slip to the vending company. Right now, to the best of my knowledge, we're one of only 2 companies in the United States that are doing, this system with AVI Foods. For the garden fresh spot. And, you can never, it's just like at home. You never have the right thing in the refrigerator. But on the other hand, it allows them to just get in and out.
And they're eating
Time is
good,
money.
they're eating good food.
Yeah, the
Well,
inputs
you
are
know,
a little better normally than
Well,
McDonald's. I'm
like
sure.
I think about, we do that a lot at our place. I mean, we bring people together, we provide lunch, we're working together. Then they don't have to leave, they don't have to go buy their own food, they don't have to get out, they don't have to risk getting in a car accident between leaving the office and going there. Really, when you look at this from the big picture standpoint and understand that time isn't money, time is more valuable than money.
Oh, yeah.
And, when you think about the dollars that are going out, the opportunity cost that you're saving in being that much more efficient by keeping people there, keeping people, tied into this. So, I mean, it's got to lend itself to efficiency, the culture. I mean, it's just such a huge win at all angles. I love that you guys do this. And this is something that we're very adamant about during tax season for our employees. But it's rare. I mean, I deal with hundreds of businesses across the country. There's very few that do it, and it's so simple.
Well, and when we were doing emergency resourcing projects, we did one for Tesla, and we had the opportunity to go out there and to help with one of his models of car to not shut the plant down. So we flew Brandon and I went and took some of our operators out to see the operation and what we were going to do. I went in there, and at that point in time, anyway, the food, the good food was free, and if you wanted junk food, you had to pay for it.
That's smart.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing now. I just know that I was impressed with. You could see and feel the differences of somebody that doesn't think inside the box.
Yeah.
We went in. They had taken that old automotive factory. All the engineers were all in one big room, and his desks were right with them. And they actually, any of the engineers, when they're making changes on the floor, those engineers' workstations go right out with the implementers.
Yep.
There's no, they resolve it in real time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing about thinking differently like that is sometimes, when we have it in the box, we're putting people in the box, and then we're slowing people down.
Yeah. So, last question, because I could literally ask Mark questions all day long.
I did bad at keeping us in time. And I apologize.
What about somebody that says to you, Mark, this is great, I love the idea, but my industry is different, right? Because everybody says that. It's like, our businesses aren't the same, my industry is different. The industrial athlete applies to all industries. Somebody comes to you and says, this works for you, my industry is different, my people won't respond to this. What do you say to somebody like that?
Well, it takes like your firm. It takes an accounting professional to work with a manufacturing specialist and come up with what is the yours were timesheets. Let's say we're doing hotel rooms. There's a certain amount of money that they're paying now for somebody to take whatever amount of time to clean that room. So now we just study that, and that actually was one of the original presentations that we did down in Texas was, as a hypothesis to say, you do that study from an accounting standard, you have a set amount, and now all of a sudden somebody's cleaning 6 hotel rooms in the same time. And when you go to check into the room, if you give it a 4-star because they missed something, it actually reduces the amount of money that person made while they're cleaning the next room. So I don't think with the anything's impossible, but there are a lot of differences between operations and having to figure that out. For example, in ours now we have no cycle time on the machine. So now we have to go out and find a system that will, with a headset, look at that part and all the parts that we have in our accounting system that are out there ready to go print, and it has to identify it for the operator. That system exists somewhere, but I've been spending, probably a year and a half trying to find that.
Well, and that's to your point at the very beginning of our conversation. If there's something that I can leave anybody that's listened to the entirety of this podcast with, is that you can make these kinds of changes to your business. You can innovate to this level, but you've got to figure out a way to put yourself in a position where you can work on the business and not be stuck in the business. And I know that every accountant in the world probably says that to their clients, and it's a pretty kind of, copy, paste, and repeat statement. But the only way things like this happen is when you can zoom out. And you can think about, well, what if we were able to, get rid of this limiting belief that this isn't going to change productivity? This isn't going to flow to the bottom line. Like, what if it did? What if that meant that you were able to double your output, still maintain the same quality? If we just flipped the script and said, people, here's how we win the game together, and it creates a culture of winning together.
Mm-hmm. Just don't ever change the standard, unless you're asked to requote the job. Leave the standard be there and build trust in that number.
Yep.
Because one of the questions that I had seen in there was basically the fact that, how can you, what's the improvement if somebody's doing the work of 5 people? There are a lot of, you have your overheads that are related to the equipment and to a person that's working in a position for all their benefits.
Yep.
So if one person's doing the work of 5, all those go away.
Right.
So, that person may be earning more, but if that person's doing the work of 5 people, this is the thing. United States is expensive to do business. Mm-hmm. Our efficiencies are going to be the solution for us to reshore.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And in that now, all of a sudden, the accounting specialists, professionals, integrate with this digital real-time, visual earnings, and allow that acceleration, to happen.
Yep.
I mean, we expect it when we go to our favorite sport. We expect them to perform. We don't expect them to show up late, with their shoelaces untied, after the game started. So if you find something you love to do, then you're really just performing. And if you didn't find something that you love to do, we shouldn't call it quitting. We should see it as the fact that because they don't have those opportunities if their parent didn't have a business, we're giving them the allowance to come into our facility and see if it's something that they, that really interests them. Because interest truly is going to be the future of America being higher performing.
Yep. Well, so best way to follow you, Mark. I mean, I know, check out Humtown Products website, social media feeds. Do you guys have a newsletter that people can sign up for on your website? And what's the best way for people to kind of, keep an eye on what's happening at Humtown and keep an eye on all the things that are happening in the world of Mark Lamoncha?
Well, Humtown and then the Industrial Athlete 4.0 website.
Awesome.
Are the two. Thanks.
Well, go check it out. We'll put the link in the notes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for hanging out with us, Mark. This was awesome.
It was great. Super.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for listening. This podcast wouldn't be possible without Stonefruit Studios and Bentley Studios. If you'd like to support the podcast, the most impactful thing you can do is subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and leave a review and/or comment. If you found this episode particularly helpful, we also encourage you to share it with a friend or on social media. Until next time, keep learning, growing, and failing forward.